Several Republican candidates for the 2024 presidential election seem to be in favor of ending birthright citizenship. In fact, it seems like the standard position for the Republican Party, despite the fact that only 42% of Republican voters are in favor of ending it. Candidates so far who have spoken out against birthright citizenship include Trump and Ron DeSantis, but today we're going to focus on Vivek Ramaswamy, who is the one who has been most open about it and has attracted attention since he openly stated that he wanted to end birthright citizenship during the second Republican debate. He has also been the most detailed with his stance on birthright citizenship and under what circumstances somebody would qualify as a citizen. So let's take a look at what he actually said during the Republican debate.
But I do go a step further. You're right about that, Ilya. I favor ending birthright citizenship for the kids of illegal immigrants in this country. Now, the left will howl about the Constitution and the 14th Amendment. The difference between me and them is I've actually read the 14th Amendment. What it says is that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the laws and jurisdiction thereof are citizens. So nobody believes that the kid of a Mexican diplomat in this country enjoys birthright citizenship. Not a judge or legal scholar in this country will disagree with me on that. Well, if the kid of a Mexican diplomat doesn't enjoy birthright citizenship, then neither does the kid of an illegal migrant who broke the law to come here. And as the father of two sons, it is hard for me to look them in the eye and say, you have to follow the law when our own government fails to follow its own laws. That's how we really go the distance and solve this problem and restore the rule of law in the United States of America, because that is part of what it even means to be an American.
Okay, so you just heard what Vivek said. His stance is very clear. He wants to end birthright citizenship for people who are the children of illegal migrants. He clarifies this later, which I'll show you in a bit. But first, let's take a look at the 14th Amendment, the citizenship clause in particular, because that's the part of the 14th Amendment that guarantees citizenship for people born in the United States by virtue of being born in the United States. Okay, so as Vivek said, the citizenship clause reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. It seems a problem that Vivek has is with the defining of the phrase subject to jurisdiction. If we look at it literally, this means being subject to the legal power and decisions of the United States. So if you commit a crime within their borders, even if you're an illegal immigrant, you will be charged and prosecuted in the United States. By this definition, just being within the borders of the United States, you are subject to its jurisdiction. Once you are in its borders, you are able to be prosecuted under U.S. law. In fact, this relates to the example Vivek brought up about the Mexican diplomat. So for those who don't know, the reason he says that the son of a diplomat wouldn't have U.S. citizenship is because diplomats are subject to something called diplomatic immunity, which, if you don't know, is when a diplomat goes to work in another country, let's say a Mexican diplomat working here, he is subject to the jurisdiction of Mexico, not the United States. And this is something they do that countries do in agreement to protect that diplomat from laws, let's say in the United States, that don't apply to him in Mexico. He is still subject to the jurisdiction of Mexico, and so he enjoys that benefit while still being in the United States working, representing his country. In fact, the very definition of diplomatic immunity uses the term subject to jurisdiction, meaning that you are bound by the law of whatever country you're in at that moment. If that weren't the case, then there would be no need for diplomatic immunity. You would just go other places and be subject to your home country's jurisdiction. But obviously that's not the case. The defining of the phrase subject to jurisdiction has actually been contested in the Supreme Court before. In the case of the United States versus Wong Kim Ark, the court decided that the term subject to jurisdiction should apply the way I've already described it, in that if you are within the borders of a country, you are under that country's law. So the majority ruled in this way, in that if you are in the country, you are to obey that law, while the dissenters actually believed that the term subject to jurisdiction meant that you are not subject to a foreign power. So let's say in this particular case, Wong Kim Ark was subject to China. He was from China. So the dissenters argued that he was subject to China because that's where he was from. That's where he had claim to citizenship. Whereas the majority decided that he was subject to the jurisdiction of the United States when he was within its borders and when he was born here. The phrase subject to jurisdiction is actually very inclusive, and I think that it was meant to be written this way, and I believe most people think that it was meant to be written this way, which is why it is interpreted in the way that it was written. Subject to jurisdiction literally means within our borders, and if you interpret it this way, then birthright citizenship is applied correctly, as it is now. It's difficult to argue that subject to jurisdiction is meant to mean anything other than what we actually interpret it as, because it would have been very easy to just clarify with the use of a few words. The writer could have simply said, and not subject to another foreign power or something like that to explain that and make it clear exactly who falls under jurisdiction of the United States. I'd say that just this term subject to jurisdiction of the United States is enough to explain why people born here should have birthright citizenship. But like the dissenters in the Wong Kim Ark case, Vivek would probably argue that people who are born here from illegal immigrants are likely subject to a foreign power, like in his case, China, or in Vivek's case, India. But he actually clarifies this a bit in a different interview where he insinuates that subject to jurisdiction of isn't necessarily about being beholden to a foreign power or being from a foreign nation, but it is more about being here legally and having kids here while here legally.
Where every kid who
Wait,
enjoys...
I'm sorry, just to backtrack. So your father is not a citizen, your
They
mother...
came to this country legally. They were in this country legally. So my view is any kid who is born in this country of parents who are here legally, that's the scope of where birthright citizenship applies. And I think it's a very simple principle. The 14th Amendment says, subject to the laws and jurisdiction thereof. So anybody who is in this country legally, under the auspices of federal law and under the auspices of U.S. law, here legally, the kid of that person, whether they've been here for 5 generations, I don't know if that's your case or not, whether they've been here for 3, 4, 5 generations.
Too, actually, by the way.
Okay, I didn't know that. But anyone who is in this country legally.
Legally.
Yep.
Illegally immigrated to the United States.
So the kid of anyone who's in this country legally, whether or not they're an immigrant, that's the scope of to whom birthright citizenship applies.
Okay, so there clearly you saw that Vivek believes that kids born here from people who are here legally deserve birthright citizenship. But this is still very inclusive, and it still runs into a lot of the same problems that birthright citizenship does. For example, just to name a few, this would include the kids of tourists, kids of immigrants who overstay their visas, kids of dual citizens who end up being raised in another country, kids of people that are here for work, and presumably the kids of even diplomats as well under his definition. I'm sure that Vivek would say that the children in these circumstances wouldn't deserve citizenship either, but in what sort of atomized way would you determine whether a person who was born here from parents here legally deserves citizenship? What kind of way would you define it to where all of these cases are separated fairly? If the parent of a kid born here legally who gained birthright citizenship, if their parent loses citizenship, does their kid also lose citizenship? How would that even work? How would you revoke citizenship from certain people? I don't disagree with Vivek that birthright citizenship causes problems with American identity, but these problems are the result of unmanaged immigration, a lack of assimilation, problems that would still exist just in a different way under Vivek's system. So let's imagine the case of dual citizenship, for example. Let's say there's a Mexican couple who both take out visas to come here and they have a child, right? And under Vivek's system, that child would be an American citizen because his parents are here legally. Now let's say they take the child back to Mexico and decide to raise him there as Mexican, despite the fact that he has American citizenship. This kid grows up going to Mexican schools. He sings the Mexican national anthem. He pledged allegiance in Mexico, and in this process, this kid never learns English, never learns American history, doesn't learn anything about the United States. In what way is this kid possibly American? Why would he deserve American citizenship? Now let's take the opposite case, for example. Let's say that the couple crossing over illegally, they cross over illegally, and they have a kid here. That kid, under Vivek's system, does not gain birthright citizenship. But let's say he's raised here. He grows up going to American schools. He grows up in American culture. He pledges allegiance to the American flag. He sings our national anthem. Let's say he even serves in the military. In what way would this kid not be American? In what way would he not deserve citizenship? If we compare the two scenarios, I'm sure everyone would agree that the second scenario would be more deserving of citizenship. Yet in Vivek's system, the second one would be the one that doesn't have a citizenship, while the first does. Also, imagine all the kids that grew up in that second scenario. Are we to revoke citizenship and deport all people who identify as American that are born here to illegal immigrants. I feel like this would create a lot of bitterness from people who identify as American and who don't really have allegiance to another country, despite their parents being from a foreign country. Another criticism that is often brought up, and I believe it was brought up by Ron DeSantis actually, is that America is unique in its offering of birthright citizenship to people that are born here. And while it is true that not all countries offer birthright citizenship, we are definitely not unique in that sense. Actually, we are in a unique category of countries that offer birthright citizenship, but that category is essentially every country in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas. Everyone in the Americas speaks a European language, whether it be English or Spanish or whatever. And that's because the Americas have always been the new frontier. They've been a safe haven for people that are persecuted, whether that's been religious or due to free speech or otherwise. And out of all countries in the Americas, all those things ring the most true for the United States, which I would also consider the most diverse of countries in the Western Hemisphere. The problem in this case is not the fact that people are being awarded citizenship by virtue of being born here. The problem is that those awarded citizenship are not assimilated into American life. They're not taught to be patriotic, and they are not integrated into American society. In many ways, I agree with Vivek. Yes, America does have an identity crisis, but this is true for people who have been here for 5 generations and for people that have only been here for 1. The relationship of your ancestry to this country has no bearing on your level of patriotism, as evidenced by the 8 founding fathers who were born on foreign soil. The American dream has often started out as an immigrant story. And by removing birthright citizenship, you are removing that claim to American identity that those people might be the best representatives of.